Well, the truth is, despite my best intentions, my Christmas door wreath is still naked. I'm out in the garden and Christmas is just around the corner. Now, if like me, you can't actually get on with any gardening now because it's the wrong time of the year, I do hope you will consider subscribing to my channel. I'm a novice gardener feeling my way 6 months in to having my own cutting patch, and all you need to do is to hit the big red button that says subscribe, and that means that next time you open the YouTube app on your phone, your laptop or your computer, one of my videos will be waiting for you. This happens to me all the time. I'm busy teaching classes, I have lots of leftover foliage, and sometimes my own festive door wreath is always put up right at the last minute. So instead of letting this bucket of greenery going to waste, I am absolutely going to be making my own Christmas door wreath with you today. So I've got my vital ingredients with me. My floristry scissors, I like these because they are really robust, but if all you've got to hand are your kitchen scissors, use your kitchen scissors. You might also need a pair of secateurs if any of your stems are particularly woody. And then here I've got mossing wire. They just come from 2 different manufacturers. So I've got one on a plastic spool and one on a wooden spool. So what I like to do is to turn my wreath over to the back. You can tell it's the back because you can see all the wire frame here. And then taking my end of my mossing wire, I slip it under the frame, twist it back, and then twist the ends together. It's a bit like if you were doing some sewing and you tie a knot to stop your thread pulling through. So that's firmly there. I take the wire back to the front. Now for my Christmas door wreath, I want to go a little bit wild and bushy this year. I tend to demonstrate door wreaths that are quite neat and compact, and I've seen all those fabulous pictures on social media, and I want to go for that wild, windswept look. But how wild and windswept, I'm not quite sure. What I am going to do here though, and wishing I had my secateurs with me, is cut off the woody stem there. And because I'm doing this outdoors, it doesn't matter if my materials ping off all over the place. So laying that on my wreath, taking my wire over and lash those good pieces of foliage onto my wreath. Now I'm not going to go all the way down to the end because eventually when I add on the next piece of material, that woody stem will get bound in. But I've given myself a bit of a feathery plume. Sometimes you get odd bits of greenery when you cut something else off. So I'm going to cut this away from the woody stem, which I think is just a little bit too far gone. And then where I've finished my wiring over, I add my next piece of greenery in. And it just needs a couple of goes round the wreath, perhaps 3 if you feel it needs to have a bit more security. And perhaps you've got some fresh Christmas tree trimmings. So I'm going to cut these down. I've got a bit of a peculiar shape, but again, I'm trying to keep everything really long. Is that going to be too long? I'm not entirely sure. So I've ended up with 3 pieces there. This is the best piece, the good looking piece that tapers off at the tips. This one, I've ended up with a V shape, but when I put it onto my wreath, I might just pinch those together to give me a much more bushy form at the top. And we'll just take out that little woody bit that's got no needles on it. I might even put that piece back and give myself something really bushy. So pinch those 2 pieces together And I'm letting them splay off the edges here instead of having them all following the ring, the round of the ring. I'm going to let them spill off to the side. And if I do that exaggerated placement, hopefully I will get something that is Instagram worthy. So the Christmas tree foliage is actually quite flat, so if you can, try and pick something with a bit more volume to it. So again, I want this to splay off, and perhaps I can just lie it over those flat bits of greenery, the Christmas tree, and I might even travel my wire back again so that instead of just binding on at the base of the greenery, I can attach it on carefully by winding through the stems instead of crunching it all down. So I want it about there, so I can flip those bits back, go over that stem there twice, flip the rest of it, bush back over it, and then travel a bit further down to lash it on at the base. There, a bit more of a 3D profile. I'm running out of wire here. I'm going to go round and then find myself the metal frame, loop it round, twist it off, and then tuck the cut end back into the body of the wreath in order that the wire won't scratch my front door. Then take my next piece of wire and do the same thing. A little bit of a twist, wrap it round for security, and then we can get going again. Aha, a nice bit of holly here. So this is the holly. I don't know whether it's the variety or just what holly normally does, but it hasn't got any prickles on it. So I'm going to work the same way without crushing the leaves, work my way down the stem. And I will cut off this leggy bit at the bottom. A bit of buried ivy. Might make a bundle of that in my hand to get rid of the lower leaves so I can see where the stem is. I think I'm going to reject that piece. So a nice bundle. And put it all in as one piece rather than wiring it all individually. And look, a week later, the viburnum tinus hasn't made it. Such a shame. Perhaps I should have put it in a bucket of water. It would have lasted longer and I could have enjoyed it indoors. But never mind. Let's carry on. So if you think you've got gaps and things like that, don't worry about it at the moment. You can always come back and infill those. I just want to get my green all the way round. And then these leaves here, quite flat and interesting shape. So I might see if I can get those to splay out. These are the ones I wasn't quite sure the name of. Is bay laurel such a thing? Or a combination of looking like a laurel tree and a bay. Again, I'm going to group those all together just for a bit of impact and bind them on together at the base. Now what I want to make sure, I want this flyaway bit of yew to still fly away, is not to track that down. So as I go around the last little bit of the wreath, I want to flick those out of the way, and then you shouldn't be able to tell where I started and where I finished. Just hope I've got some enough usable greenery in the bottom of my bucket. A bit of holly and ivy there, being very traditional. This piece of ivy's got a nice natural bend on it, just giving me a sense of movement. The monster bunch. So all the time I'm putting the bushy heads over the binding, the last piece of material. And I'm placing my materials so they splay out over the outer edge of the wreath. And that will make it look bigger, more imposing, more luxurious. So flip that yew upwards. It's a bit tricky as you finish off. So binding over what I hope will be my last bunch without trapping in anything from the very first stems that I added to the wreath. Take a look. Well, it certainly is a little bit wayward. And like all things we do when we're flower arranging, I'll need to put it on the table or hang it on the wall and just see whether I'm happy with it. So I might go in with this last bit of Eleagnus. I think if I can find my scissors, I'll just chop out the tip. It just looks as if it's gone a little bit over. I might be using forage materials, but I want to look as beautiful as I can. Now putting something really bushy underneath the yew, just to fill that gap a little bit. So I've got my thumb on where the stem is, and then I'll have to wend my wire through the wreath to get that to hold tight without squashing that first bit of yew. There we go. I reckon I've done one complete round. I'll have to come back and see whether I've got any gaps I want to fill up. So I'm going to cut off about 10 centimetres of wire, find my way down to the metal wreath frame and stitch over a couple of times, finding my end and then pushing that cut end back into the wreath so that when I run my hand over the back of the wreath, there's no stray wires that are going to snag on my hand and therefore snag on my front door. So I reckon now this slot can finally go on the compost heap. So what do you reckon? It's definitely got some wayward elements. Although here, where I put the holly in, I think it's a little bit sparse, so I feel I need something in there. What I might do is find those hydrangeas that I dried a few months ago and perhaps tuck those into the gaps, and I can do that with a hot glue gun. But of course, it may be that if I hadn't drawn that to your attention, you might not have noticed, or I could spin the whole thing over and put a ribbon there and use that to hang up, and then that would disguise the gap a little bit. What do you think? Which way up should it go? Where should my tail disappear to? Right, compost heap, here I come. So there isn't really much to look at in the garden. My Arum Italicum pictums are doing well. I can see a little grouping of forget-me-nots, the helleborus that I planted last week. I think I've got some carex grass coming up. The bear's breeches, what are they called? Acanthus. The lavender that I trimmed back, well, replanted, gave it a haircut and transplanted it from the front garden. And my skimmia is looking absolutely gorgeous. Now I wonder whether I dare cut some of that skimmia to put it in the gap of my door wreath. So scissors, let's get cutting. And I guess what I ought to do is sort of measure twice and cut once. I can just see myself, I've got a little bit of gap here. So I don't want to take any more than I actually need. Nice big stem there. Oh, actually, nice bit of colour actually. Oh, I might take 3 pieces. And when you have got distinctive elements in your door wreath, whether that's going to be your skimmia or pine cones, whatever you decide, I would never put 4 pieces in because it squares off your wreath and you want to get that sense of flow. And that's why florists and flower arrangers always work in odd numbers. So I could either separate them out into thirds or group them together. So I think I'm going to have to put this on my table and have a really good look. I still haven't really decided which way's up with this. I feel there's a definite vacant, but I feel there's a definite empty patch here and perhaps even over here. So what do you think? I don't think I want to put them like that, 3 evenly spaced. This bit's quite bushy here. I'm wondering whether perhaps have a couple there and then one at the top. So next thing we need to do is decide how to fix them. So maybe I can just wiggle it underneath the ring, the binding that I did earlier on. Or I might need to do separate wires to attach them on. So that one has slid in quite nicely. So the other option would be to work out where you're going to put your extra foliage. I'm just going to cut that tail off and then take a piece of my binding wire, cut it off. I've probably got about 25 or 30 centimetres there. And I'm going to tie that wire very carefully around the stem. I'm going to go at the base of the head here. Oops. Right, so tying it tightly, but not so firmly that I decapitate the stem. I want to keep all that lovely textural colour there. And twist just to secure. So I've gone round twice and twisted. Just like that. And then slide the foliage in where you want it. And I'm going to take those 2 long wires round either side of the wreath and twist them at the back. And then bury those cut ends into the body of the wreath. So you can do either way. You just need to make sure that once the wreath is on your door, that nothing falls. It's always a good idea to give it a bit of a waggle while you're making it. Because with the opening and closing of your doors over the festive period, you don't want bits of greenery pinging out all over the place. And I think this other one, I'm going to nestle down in here. I wonder whether I can just slide it in again. There. It looks like it was always intended to be there. So what do you reckon? Does it need a little bit of hydrangea? I've got lots of colour and interest here, textural contrast, but but with the bushy conifer there, it has got lots of volume, but there's not much visual interest. So I might go indoors and just place a couple of hydrangea heads there before I commit myself. Back indoors at my kitchen table, so I've just gone through some of my stash of my hydrangea heads. This one's still got lots of the lovely natural colour. And then this one here, it's got a little bit of a tinge of orange spray paint. I think that was from the dried wreath that I made, must have been a month or so ago now. If I can find that video, I'll leave a link to it in the description of this one. In fact, I've got a whole playlist of door wreath making videos, so I'll leave a link to that in the notes underneath this video. I've also got the option of using my oak leaves, which I saved, but I don't think they're going to be quite right. I think they just look a bit too messy. So before I commit with cutting my stems, I'll just place them where I think I need a little bit of visual interest. Perhaps to lighten up this area. I'm not sure whether the orange spray paint is adding anything. Perhaps the one here that's more natural in colour might be worth considering. And that's always a decision to be made. When do you stop adding stuff? Let's go for the one, and then it picks up on the red of the skimmier heads. Yes, decision made. So I'll trim the stem down and see whether I can waggle it in to my bindings, and if not, I will put a bead. If not, I'll put a line of hot glue along there and then slide it into position. So what do you reckon? There is my finished garden inspired door wreath. All I need to do now is go and hang it up. I think probably I'm going to put a piece of ribbon underneath the ring here, just to add another festive detail. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me in the garden today. And if you're interested in more behind the scenes videos, or indeed my Christmas flower arranging and crafting club, you'll find the joining details in the description underneath this video. That's all for me for now, and I'll see you in the garden next time.